The Dark Guest by Sarah Hamaker. The Cold War is over, but the wolf is still at the door. When Violet Lundy isn't cleaning rooms at Happy Hill's assisted living facility, she loves spending her free time with resident Rainer Kopasek. Hearing his stories of the dangerous life he led behind the Iron Curtain in East Berlin makes her own life seem more tolerable. But when Rainer is found dead and his room in disarray, Violet suspects foul play. Dr. Henry Silverton lives among his books, teaching and writing about the Cold War. A letter about an East German traitor known only as the Wolf propels Henry out of academia and into Violet's life. Together, they embark on a perilous quest to uncover the truth about Rainer's death and the traitor's identity. Can Violet and Henry uncover the secrets of the past before one of them ends up as the wolf's next victim? Now an excerpt from The Dark Guest by Sarah Hamaker.
You have a date tonight?
Rainer Kopasek smiled from his seat by the window, which overlooked the manicured lawn of the Happy Hill assisted living facility. Violet Lundy returned the old German smile as she removed the pillows from his bed. "Only if you're available." He cackled with glee.
If I were only
40 years younger. She finished his sentence before stripping the bed and tossing the sheets into her cart. "I don't mind being alone."
You are much too young to give up on love. Too pretty as well.
"You sound like a matchmaker." She snapped a fresh sheet on the twin bed, then sprinkled a little lavender on it to help cover the strong disinfectant odor that permeated all of the laundry. Of all the residents at the facility, she liked Mr. Kopasek best because of his optimism.
Nothing wrong with that.
He waggled a gnarled finger.
I would like you settled before I meet my maker.
"I thought you were going to live as long as Methuselah," she chuckled, "so I have plenty of time." He shrugged his shoulders.
Life, it can be cut short. You should not wait too long to find someone.
Violet smoothed on the top sheet and thought about how Patrick had demonstrated all too clearly how fragile life was. To change the subject, she nodded at the framed photograph of a glowing bride and handsome groom that graced the bedside table. "Not everyone can be as lucky as you and Verna." The old man's eyes misted as he followed her gaze to the picture.
Well, we had 26 good years together before she died.
After fluffing his pillow, Violet dusted the dresser top. "You must still miss her very much." Mr. Kopasek stared at the photograph.
We have now been apart longer than we were married.
Violet touched his shoulder. Mr. Kopasek never failed to notice her as a person, not just someone who cleaned his room. He had a way of drawing her into conversation. She always did his room last, so she could visit after her shift ended.
Have I told you how we met?
Mr. Kopasek winked. He had shared about his wife on numerous occasions. "You know I love to hear it." As Mr. Kopasek relayed the familiar events, Violet straightened his clothes in the closet, some of which hung like drunken sailors on the hangers. She poked her head out and caught his eye. "Mr. Kopasek, why is your closet in disarray? Were you looking for something?" He motioned her to come closer. Violet moved to his chair.
It was not me. Someone went through my things,
he whispered.
But no one will find it. I have hidden it.
His low voice, coupled with his German accent, prompted her to lean down in hopes of better understanding him.
You will help me?
His hand clutched hers, and his breathing quickened.
Because the time has come to right a past wrong.
Violet covered his wrinkled hand with hers. I will help you if I can.
No matter what happens to me, the truth must come out.
He squared his shoulders and tapped his chest with his forefinger.
I withstood the best the Stasi could throw at me. If I would not break then, I will not now.
Violet hid the uneasiness that crept up her spine by squeezing his hand to express her support. Mr. Kopasek had hinted that his life in East Berlin had its dark side, but he had never revealed anything more troubling than stories about soap shortages. Tell me what you need.
I knew you would help.
He puckered his lips as if eating lemon.
Miss Siddons humors me as if I do not know what I say.
His rheumy eyes met hers.
But I do. I know why I will not be left in peace. It is because of der Wolf.
The wolf? Mr. Kopasek had been saying strange things lately, but she had thought it a symptom of old age memory loss. After all, the man was 86. Now, though, with his voice firm and his eyes beseeching, perhaps he wasn't losing his mind after all.
Yes, der Wolf has risen from the dead. Now I will be silenced.
He gripped her arm with his other hand and pressed his fingers firmly against the flesh.
I know too much about the days of old.
She patted his hand even as her own pulse quickened by the urgency in his tone. For whatever reason, he thought danger lurked nearby, and she needed to reassure him of her support to calm him down. You know I would do anything for you, Mr. Kopasek. He relaxed his grip.
You are a good girl, and will make some man a good wife. Get married soon. Have many children, which God did not grant to us.
Violet let out a breath. He often peppered his speech with God, something that made her a bit uncomfortable since she hadn't been talking to the deity lately. At least he'd forgotten all about the closet and what he wanted her to do for him. She started to pull her hands away when he tugged her closer. He whispered in her ear,
Verna loved to walk in the rain.
Startled at the non sequitur, she leaned back. He seemed to expect her to say something, so she repeated the sentence softly. Before she could ask for an explanation, someone rapped on the door, and Violet jumped. Mr. Kopasek's manner had affected her more than she'd realized. Come in. Violet straightened up and turned to face the entrance. Dora's sturdy frame filled the doorway. Mr. Kopasek, time for dinner. The aide entered the room. It's Swiss steak night.
My favorite.
Mr. Kopasek glanced at Violet.
Remember what I said. You will know what to do when comes the time.
Dora reached down and helped him to his feet, saying over her shoulder, See you tomorrow, Violet. Once Mr. Kopasek and Dora left the room, Violet gathered her cleaning supplies. She turned off the light and closed the door. What exactly did Mr. Kopasek want her to do? After clocking out for the evening, she paused to take a careful look around the parking lot before getting into her vehicle. Mr. Kopasek's talk about a wolf must have shaken her more than she realized if she was looking for a boogeyman in a brightly lit lot outside of an assisted living home in the relative safety of Fairfax, Virginia. His last words played again in her mind as she started the car, along with the puzzling fact that while he talked about his wife frequently, Mr. Kopasek had never once mentioned Verna liked to walk in the rain. She would have to ask him tomorrow what he meant and why he needed her help. Violet's strange conversation with Mr. Kopasek made her reluctant to go directly home after work. Stepping into a cup of coffee, she breathed in the strong aroma of roasted coffee beans and pastries. A cup of tea and a pain au chocolat would soothe her troubled thoughts. She moved to the pastry counter and eyed the last remaining chocolate croissant. Her mouth watered in anticipation of biting into the flaky pastry. As she smiled at the barista standing ready to take her order, another employee reached into the pastry case and plucked up her croissant with tongs to place on the plate held in her other hand.
"What can I get you tonight?"
The barista's words drew Violet's attention back to her order. "A large to-go cup of Earl Grey tea." She nibbled on her lip. "Any chance you have another pain au chocolat?" The barista glanced at the pastry case, now devoid of the chocolate-filled croissant.
"I don't see one. Do you want something else?"
"No, thank you." The barista rang up the order and accepted payment. Then another employee handed Violet the hot drink. At the condiment counter, she added a splash of cream and a packet of raw sugar. Turning to leave, Violet spotted the croissant residing uneaten on a plate at the table of a handsome man around her age. His brown hair brushed the collar of his button-down Oxford shirt. The man pushed his glasses back up on the bridge of his nose and took a sip of his steaming beverage before returning his attention to the pile of papers in front of him. Mr. Kopasek's words about not being alone echoed in her ears. Her rather solitary existence didn't put her in the path of many men, eligible or not. A surreptitious glance at his left hand, which rested on the table as he bent over the papers, revealed no wedding ring. Maybe a man who liked chocolate croissants would be worth getting to know. Before she could talk herself out of it, she wove her way through the tables to stop at his booth. At first, the man didn't notice her, and Violet's courage fled like a flock of birds startled by a predator. But just before she could take a step back, the man raised his head, and her eyes locked with his warm brown ones. She'd never noticed before just how attractive a pair of eyes could be.
"May I help you?"
Violet froze, heat rising in her cheeks. All thoughts of fleeing or anything else vanished in an instant as a spark ignited the air between them. She caught her breath in a half gasp. "Well, you see, you have my pastry." Dr. Henry Silverton gaped at the young woman standing in front of him before shifting his gaze to the croissant on the plate by his left hand.
"This is yours?"
"No." The woman shifted, and her long auburn hair slid over one shoulder in a cascade that reminded Henry of a waterfall. "I meant I wanted to have a pain au chocolat, but it looks like you bought the last one."
"I see."
Henry most certainly did not see, but he definitely wanted to continue talking to the pretty young lady. If only he were good at small talk, he would find a way to make her smile. He suspected she had a lovely one.
"I haven't eaten it. Do you want it?"
The woman flushed a deeper red and clutched her beverage cup so tight Henry feared it might split from the pressure. "That's very nice of you, but I couldn't take your pastry. I mean, I shouldn't have bothered you. I'm sorry for having disturbed you while you were working. Have a good evening." After the flurry of words, she fled the coffee house before Henry could protest. If he were an able-bodied man, he would have jumped up and run after her to get her name and perhaps her phone number. But such a feat was beyond his capabilities. At least she hadn't appeared to see his crutches propped up in the corner of the booth. For once, he had been able to enjoy an encounter with a member of the opposite sex that didn't involve pity. Even if he had known her name or had a way to contact her, once she discovered he wasn't a whole man, their relationship would end like all the others. Best to stick to studying the Cold War. At least the historical facts he dealt with didn't cause disappointment.